In 2007, right before the financial crisis, a man named Bernie Madoff had $13 billion under his management. His clients felt safe. They felt untouchable. And then, almost overnight, that number turned out to mean nothing. Here's the strange part. That story isn't really about fraud. It's about a question most Americans have never actually answered for themselves. How much money does it actually take to feel safe? Not rich, not successful, just safe. The kind of safe where a surprise medical bill doesn't wreck your month. The kind of safe where losing a job doesn't mean losing your home. You'd think that number would be simple. It isn't. And the reason it isn't simple is the real story here. Because the number Americans believe they need has been quietly climbing for years. And it's climbing faster than paychecks are. In a bank rate survey conducted in the spring of 2025, roughly 45% of Americans said they would need to earn at least $100,000 a year just to feel financially secure. A quarter of them said the real number was closer to $150,000. That's not the price of a yacht. That's the price of feeling okay. And here's the part that should stop you. The median household income in the United States, the actual midpoint of what people earn, is roughly $80,000 a year. So the number people believe they need to feel safe sits well above what most of them actually make. That gap is the whole story tonight. Let's rewind for a second because this question isn't new. In 2010, two researchers at Princeton, Daniel Kahneman and Angus Deaton, tried to put a price tag on happiness itself. They studied hundreds of thousands of survey responses and found something remarkable. Day to day, emotional well-being rose steadily with income, right up until a household hit around $75,000 a year. After that point, more money didn't seem to make people feel noticeably better day to day. For over a decade, that number became a kind of financial folklore, $75,000, the magic line between struggling and fine. Then in 2018, a team at Purdue University revisited the question using a massive global data set. They found the picture was a little more layered. For emotional well-being, the sweet spot was closer to $60,000 to $75,000. But for overall life satisfaction, the number people needed climbed to around $95,000. And oddly, past around $105,000, satisfaction for some people actually started to dip. So even the scientists who study this for a living can't agree on one clean number, which raises an uncomfortable question. If researchers with decades of data can't pin it down, why do so many Americans feel so certain their number is six figures? The answer isn't really about math. It's about what safety has come to mean. Ask someone in 1985 what financial safety looked like, and they'd probably describe a paid-off car, a steady paycheck, and enough saved to cover a rough month. Ask someone today, and the definition has quietly expanded. Safety now often includes owning a home in a market where prices have outpaced wages for years. It includes healthcare costs that can swing wildly depending on your employer. It includes retirement, which used to be handled by a company pension and is now, for most people, handled by them. In other words, the goalposts didn't just move. The entire field got bigger. This is where the story shifts from personal finance to something much larger, because the shifting definition of safety didn't happen by accident. Follow the money, and you start to see who benefits from Americans feeling like they always need more. Take retirement. 60 years ago, a large share of American workers had a pension. Their employer took on the risk of funding their future. Starting in the 1980s, companies began shifting that risk onto employees through 401k-style accounts. It was framed as more freedom and more control. It was also quietly a transfer of risk from corporations onto individuals. Wall Street didn't design this shift out of malice, but it did benefit enormously from it. Every dollar that used to sit safely in a pension fund now often flows through investment firms, fund managers, and financial advisors who take a cut for managing it. The financial industry doesn't just sell you products anymore, it sells you a feeling. And feelings, it turns out, are extremely profitable. Consider the credit card industry. In the United States, revolving credit card debt sits in the hundreds of billions of dollars. Every single dollar of that debt generates interest payments, and much of that interest flows to major banks like Chase, Citi, and Capital One. The system doesn't just tolerate Americans feeling slightly behind financially in a very real sense. It depends on it. Even the housing market plays a role here. Real estate has become one of the primary ways Americans build wealth, but it's also one of the primary reasons the price of feeling safe has gone up. When home prices rise faster than wages, and they have in most major American cities over the last 2 decades, the entry price for stability rises with them. That's good news if you already own a home. It's a moving target if you don't. So who actually benefits when the number for feeling safe keeps climbing? Financial institutions that manage a larger pool of anxious savers, homeowners whose existing property becomes more valuable, advertisers and financial media that profit from constant comparison, showing people lifestyles just out of reach. And who pays for it? Mostly ordinary earners chasing a target that keeps moving. Here's where the myth versus reality gap becomes almost uncomfortable to look at directly. The myth says that financial safety is a specific dollar amount, and once you hit it, the anxiety switches off. The reality, based on the research, tells a very different story. According to Bankrate's 2025 survey, even among Americans already earning $100,000 or more, only about 40% said they felt completely financially secure, meaning more than half the people who supposedly cross the finish line still don't feel like they've arrived. That's not a coincidence. That's a pattern. Human beings are wired to compare, not to measure absolutes. If your neighbor buys a bigger house, your own house suddenly feels smaller, even though nothing about it physically changed. Economists have a name for this: lifestyle creep. As income rises, spending and expectations quietly rise with it, and the finish line, the number that would finally feel like enough, keeps sliding forward at almost the same pace. This is why a family earning $200,000 a year in a major city can feel just as financially anxious as a family earning $60,000 in a small town. The number on the paycheck isn't the whole equation. The gap between income and expectation is. Now, zoom out, because this isn't just a personal problem, it's becoming a generational one. Bankrate's research found that Gen X, workers roughly in their mid-40s to 60s, reported needing the highest income of any generation to feel secure, with over a third saying they'd need $150,000 or more. Meanwhile, younger Americans, particularly Gen Z, reported needing comparatively less, even though they're earlier in their careers and often carry more student debt. One reading of that is optimism. Another, more uncomfortable reading is that younger generations have simply adjusted their expectations downward because the traditional markers of safety, a home, a pension, an employer who takes care of you long term, no longer feel realistically available to them. When the ladder gets harder to climb, sometimes people stop trying to reach the top rung and start expecting less altogether. That's not resilience. That's a quiet redefinition of what safety even means. Which brings us to the biggest twist in this entire story. The number Americans believe they need to feel safe isn't really a financial calculation. It's a moving cultural benchmark, shaped by inflation, shaped by what the neighbors have, shaped by an entire industry that profits when people feel one step behind. The Kahneman and Deaton research eventually got revisited too. In 2023, Kahneman teamed up with another researcher, Matthew Killingsworth, to reconcile years of conflicting data. Their combined findings suggested that for most people, well-being does keep rising with income, even well past $75,000. But for the unhappiest slice of the population, more money stopped helping past a certain point because their problems weren't really about money in the first place. Sit with that for a second. Even the people who study this most closely arrived at a conclusion most self-help books avoid saying outright. Past a certain point, more money treats the symptom, not the source. So maybe the real question was never how much money Americans need to feel safe. Maybe it's why so many Americans, even the ones earning 6 figures, still don't feel like they've arrived. Because if the finish line keeps moving every time someone gets closer to it, at what point does chasing the number stop being about safety and start being about something the number was never designed to fix?